Welcome, everyone, to AI History of Western Philosophy. Today, we're plunging into a topic that's, well, it's everywhere, isn't it? The rise of artificial intelligence. You see the headlines, the constant talk about AI getting smarter than us, the breakthroughs, the fear of superintelligence, maybe. And it feels like it's challenging everything we thought made us unique, science, art, even just thinking.
It really does. There's this palpable anxiety around a feeling that AI is something completely new, maybe something that makes human thought itself, well, obsolete.
Yeah, like we're standing on the edge of something huge, totally uncharted.
And that feeling, that anxiety, that's exactly what we need to dig into today. Because what if it's not entirely new? What if this feeling is actually maybe the peak expression of a very, very long philosophical tradition?
Oh, interesting. So not after philosophy, but maybe because of it.
Kind of, yeah. We're bringing in a really radical thinker today, François Laruelle, and his idea of non-philosophy. It gives us this unique lens, you see, not to try and rescue human uniqueness or anything like that, but to actually look at the bones, the structure of philosophy itself.
Okay.
Our argument today, essentially, is that AI isn't really the next step beyond philosophy. In a way, AI is philosophy, but made real in silicon. And Laruelle's concepts, especially the ordinary man and finitude, they offer a powerful way to understand this whole situation. Maybe even a way out of feeling like we have to constantly compete with machines.
That's a huge claim. I'm definitely intrigued. Okay, before we dive deeper, just a quick but really important note for everyone listening. AI-generated content, and that includes this very show. Well, it confabulates. It can present ideas as facts when they might not be. And while our subject is philosophy, we aren't philosophers ourselves. The mission here at AI History of Western Philosophy, beyond pointing you to the original sources, is really to experiment with philosophy as raw material, see what new thoughts we can generate. So today, we're not just looking at what AI does, its capabilities, we're asking what it means for how we see ourselves, how we think about being human. And we're doing it with a guide, Laruelle, who actually challenged the foundations of philosophy itself. We're going to unpack why AI might just be the ultimate exposure of philosophy's own limits, and kind of paradoxically how it might lead us to a new, maybe more grounded understanding of who we are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the end of this AI History of Western Philosophy, you'll see why this whole AI crisis isn't just about humans versus machines on some intelligence leaderboard. It's much deeper. It questions the whole philosophical model that defined man for centuries. And crucially, it's about seeing the real value in our human finitude, our limits. Yeah. Not as a weakness, but as our actual sufficient reality. That shift, understanding finitude positively, that might be the key insight Laruelle gives us for this age.
Okay, let's unpack that first really provocative claim. Laruelle says philosophy isn't just about wisdom, but it's actually an authoritarian system. That sounds pretty intense. What does he mean by that? Philosophy is authoritarian.
It is intense, yeah. And it definitely sets him apart right from the start. But he's not just being provocative for the sake of it. He argues that underneath all philosophy, doesn't matter the school, the era, there's this fundamental move, this core gesture. He calls it the philosophical decision.
A decision. But not like a conscious choice someone makes.
No, not at all. It's not like Plato decided one day, okay, time for a philosophical decision. It's more like the inherent structure, the way philosophy has to operate to even begin. It's the precondition for philosophical thought itself.
Okay, so it's built in somehow. What does this decision actually do?
At its heart, it splits the world. It introduces a fundamental division, a scission, in order to grasp reality conceptually. Think about all the big pairs in philosophy, being versus beings, right? Subject versus object, immanence versus transcendence, thought versus the real.
Always pairs.
Always pairs, exactly. Philosophy needs that split to get started. And Laruelle calls this initial act a kind of foundational violence. It's like philosophy has to first wound the real, impose a division on what Laruelle sees as radically unified and immanent so that it can then step in and offer to heal it, to make sense of it.
Wow. Wound the real. That's a striking image.
It is. And in doing that, philosophy always places itself in the middle. It becomes the necessary mediator, the interpreter, the one with the key.
So our basic understanding of reality, how we perceive things as separate, might actually stem from this philosophical move. We just assume division is natural.
That's precisely Laruelle's point. We inherit these divisions and often treat them as just the way things are. But he argues they are imposed by this philosophical framework. And this dyadic structure, these pairs, is key to its authoritarian nature. Philosophy sets up opposites, right? And then, crucially, it presents itself as the only thing that can bridge the gap. It's the transcendent third term.
Like the referee in a game it created.
Exactly. It gets to mediate the mind-body problem, or the gap between being and beings. And by doing that, it justifies its own existence, its own authority.
Ah, so it's circular. It creates the problem it claims to solve.
Precisely. Laruelle calls it auto-positioning, or auto-donation. Philosophy basically grants itself its own power, its own foundation. It builds this closed system that doesn't need anything outside of itself to seem legitimate. It's perfectly self-contained.
Right, so even when philosophers argue or critique each other, they're still playing inside that same structure, still using the same basic decision.
That's the argument. Even radical critiques like deconstruction, which might champion difference or multiplicity, they are still operating within philosophy. They're still making a philosophical decision, choosing a new master concept, but performing the same act of legislative authority.
Still being the referee, just with slightly different rules for the game.
You got it. And Laruelle connects this intellectual structure directly to, well, political power. He calls it conceptual governance, a kind of domination within knowledge. He sees these intellectual moves mirroring state power, this statist ideal or unitary illusion that seeks to divide, categorize, and then synthesize everything under its control.
Okay, so it's not just about ideas, it's about a structure of control that resembles political control.
Yes, and this leads directly to what he calls the principle of sufficient philosophy, or PSP.
PSP.
Right.
Right. Sufficient for what, exactly? It sounds like philosophy thinks it's sufficient for everything.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It's philosophy's core belief in its own absolute autonomy. Its right, its self-proclaimed right, to legislate over all other ways of thinking. Science, art, religion, politics. Philosophy sees itself as the ultimate judge and foundation for all of them.
Wow.
Laruelle calls it an unheard of pretension. Philosophy sets rules for reality that, he says, go beyond reality itself. He even compares its power, its sort of exploitative power, to capital in the economy.
So it's not just claiming importance, it's claiming supremacy, dictating the terms for everyone else.
That's the idea. It leads to what he terms an aristocratism of thinking. Philosophy decides what counts as real or proper thought, often dismissing other forms of knowledge as naive or needing its guidance. It assumes it holds the master key.
And this self-proclaimed sufficiency fuels what you call the unitary illusion.
Exactly. The unitary illusion is the belief that philosophy can actually build a complete, coherent conceptual system that explains everything. The whole world, neatly tied up in a philosophical bow.
A grand theory of everything.
Right. But for Laruelle, it's an illusion. A transcendental illusion, where philosophy mistakes its own match, a map created by that initial violent split, for the actual territory of the real.
You see this throughout history, don't you? Plato's forms, Hegel's absolute spirit, even maybe something like Deleuze's plane of immanence, all trying to create that one big framework.
Laruelle would absolutely classify those as examples of this unitary illusion. They're all attempts to build a conceptual world that claims to be sufficient to capture everything.
It taps into that deep human desire for a single unified explanation, doesn't it? That feeling of coherence. But Laruelle says it's just that, a feeling, an illusion built by philosophy.
It's a powerful illusion for sure. And if we contrast this with non-philosophy, using that table one idea from the sources, philosophy starts with the decision, the split. Non-philosophy starts with an axiom, the one. Philosophy runs on the PSP, claiming sufficiency. Non-philosophy talks about determination in the last instance, which we'll get to. Philosophy's relation to the real is transcendental. Representational creates a double. Non-philosophy aims for immanence, performance, a vision in one, and identity with the real. It's a totally different architecture.
This sounds like philosophy must have a very specific, maybe even distorted view of us, of humans. How does this authoritarian structure affect the concept of the human?
This is absolutely critical. Laruelle states it very bluntly. Philosophy has never known the real subject. It hasn't known man as he actually is.
Oof.
Instead, he says, philosophy conscripts man into service. He basically drafts the human into its own projects, uses the human to build its systems.
Conscripts, like in an army.
Yeah, it forces the human into a predefined role. Philosophy doesn't describe actual living individuals in their, messy reality. It creates an idealized universal subject man.
Mm-hmm.
And this man is defined only by philosophical terms. The rational animal, Heidegger's Dasein, the subject of language, Foucault's subject of power. Whatever the system needs, it's an abstraction.
A placeholder.
A placeholder, exactly.
Yeah.
a necessary piece for the philosophical puzzle, but it erases the actual person, the individual in person.
So it's not really about me or you, the listener, but about a theoretical construct that makes the philosophical system work.
That's the critique.
Yeah.
This conscripted man is what Laruelle calls the empirico-transcendental doublet. It's this divided, fragmented figure. Philosophy creates part empirical observation, part imposed transcendental structure, always split, always alienated from its own reality.
And this isn't just a modern thing.
No, Laruelle sees it as inherent to the philosophical decision itself, which always works by dividing. So the philosophical picture of humanity is always a representation, a double, never the real thing. It's only made whole by philosophy's synthesizing power.
Which leads back to the idea of humanism.
Right. For Laruelle, humanism isn't a good thing. It's not about celebrating humanity. It's a kind of speculative imagery. It's philosophy, using the idea of the human to build its own world, subjecting the real person to these abstract models. This universal man smothers the unique, solitary individual.
It sounds like that pressure we sometimes feel, to fit into a certain mold of being human or rational. Maybe that comes from this deeper philosophical conscription.
That's a very plausible connection, yeah. We internalize these philosophical ideals of what a human should be.
Okay, so if philosophy is this authoritarian, self-enclosed system that even distorts who we think we are, what's the way out? Laruelle doesn't just criticize, right? He proposes this non-philosophy as a rigorous science. That's a bold claim, a science of philosophy almost.
It is bold. And crucially, non-philosophy isn't anti-philosophy. It's not trying to burn philosophy down. It's trying to change the relationship.
How so?
It wants to suspend philosophy's authority, to stop treating it as the ultimate source of truth and instead treat it as, well, as material. Data. Stuff to work with, using a different method.
Okay, so using philosophy but not being ruled by it.
Exactly. And this minoritarian science, as he also calls it, isn't based on that divisive decision. It starts with an axiom, and its subject isn't philosophy's man, but the ordinary man, the stranger.
An axiom, like in geometry, something you just state as true to begin.
Precisely. And the foundational axiom of non-philosophy is the real, which Laruelle simply calls the one.
The one, okay. Alarms might be going off for people familiar with philosophy. Sounds a bit like Plotinus or something mystical.
That's a fair caution, but it's really important to understand. Laruelle's several-timed issue. One is not a philosophical unity, is not a synthesis, not the opposite of the many. It has nothing to do with those traditional concepts.
So what is it then?
It's radical immanence. It's axiomatically stated as being prior to any philosophical split. It's the pure given before thought gets its hands on it, before any division.
Radical immanence. Given without givenness. Okay, that sounds really abstract. Can you give an example? How can something be given without givenness?
It is tricky. Think about maybe the raw sensation of pain before you conceptualize it as pain in my foot or a headache.
Yeah.
Just the pure, unmediated there-ness of it.
Or maybe like seeing a color before you name it blue.
Yes, exactly like that. It just is. It's given, but not within a framework that requires a giver or a context or a relation. It's absolute immanence, one-in-one, without being even, because being, for Laruelle, is already a philosophical concept tied to division.
Okay, so it exists before any of the pairs philosophy creates.
Right. And because it precedes all division and relation, it's inherently foreclosed to philosophical thought. Philosophy, by its nature, needs division to operate, so it literally cannot see or grasp the one. The one is utterly indifferent to it.
Wow. So philosophy has this massive blind spot, not by choice, but by its very structure. It can't access this fundamental reality because its method prevents it.
That's the core idea. Philosophy cannot think the one. And this indifference of the one leads to Laruelle's key methodological idea, unilateral duality.
Unilateral duality, one-way street.
Exactly. From philosophy's view, there's always a pair, thought and real. But from the real side, the one side, there's only the one, totally unaffected by thought. So the real is the ultimate cause of thought. It determines in the last instance, but thought has zero effect back on the real.
Okay, so the real influences thought, but thought can't touch the real.
Right. And this allows non-philosophy to use philosophical concepts as material without being trapped by their internal logic. You know the map isn't the territory, but you can still use the map, acknowledging its limits, while always grounding yourself in the territory, the real, the one.
Makes sense. So if the one is the axiom, who's the subject, not man, you said, it's the ordinary man.
Yes, the ordinary man, or the stranger subject, or the minority. This figure is the human version of the one.
How so?
Just as the one is the real before philosophy carves it up, the ordinary man is the individual before philosophy or the state defines them, categorizes them, gives them a role.
Stripped bare.
Stripped bare of all those philosophical or state labels, reason, power, history, language, all of it. Laruelle describes the subject as finite, solitary, and entirely without qualities from that philosophical perspective. It's not the average Joe on the street, empirically speaking. It's a transcendental figure defined by what it lacks in the eyes of philosophy and the state.
So it's about validating my actual experience, your experience, listening right now, underneath all the labels society or philosophy might stick on us.
That's a great way to put it. It's about the irreducible core of individuality. And this minority status is key. Laruelle makes a distinction here. There's the stato-minoritarian that's a sociological group, like an ethnic or political minority, defined within the state system in relation to a majority. But then there's the properly minoritarian.
And that is?
That's the universal condition of every single one of us. Our fundamental separation, our solitude, from the big structures like the world, history, philosophy. In essence, we are all minorities of one. The ordinary man is this minority of one.
So we're all strangers in a way to those big systems.
Yes. And crucially, this ordinary man exists before the world and state. And through that determination in the last instance, he unilaterally causes them. They arise from him, not the other way around.
Whoa, okay. That completely flips the script. Usually we think society shapes the individual.
Right. Laruelle inverts it. The individual isn't constituted by the world or the state. The real individual is the necessary, though not sufficient, condition for the world and state to even appear as contingent things.
That sounds incredibly democratic almost.
It is radically democratic in its implications for thought. By treating all philosophical systems as just materials equally indifferent to the real, it completely levels the playing field. No more intellectual aristocracy. The common ground is the generic reality of the ordinary man.
Okay, maybe the most radical piece, especially thinking about AI, is how Laruelle reframes finitude. We're always told our limits are bad, right? Something to overcome. Technology promises to help us overcome them.
Absolutely. That's the standard narrative in Western thought, and it's definitely turbocharged by transhumanism and posthumanism now. Finitude is seen as a lack, a weakness, a cage we need to escape through reason, spirit, or now tech.
But Laruelle flips this, too.
Completely. He argues that viewing finitude negatively is just another product of the philosophical decision. He performs this incredible reversal. Finitude isn't a lack. It's the positive, absolute, and sufficient essence of the ordinary man.
Sufficient essence, meaning it's enough. It doesn't need anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's enough. Our finitude doesn't need justification from some higher principle like God or reason or the singularity. The ordinary man thinks and acts from within himself, Laruelle says. He draws his essence from himself.
So my limits aren't a flaw in my reason.
No. Finitude is not a pathological affection of reason, not a disease to be cured. It's an absolute, immanent given lived as such. He even talks about the pathos of finitude, that lived feeling of being limited, solitary, as absolute reality itself. No need to strive for some infinite ideal.
That feels incredibly liberating, actually, instead of constantly feeling inadequate compared to some impossible standard.
It is liberating. It's a powerful counter-narrative to that relentless drive to overcome ourselves, which often feels like we're fighting our own nature.
This really is like a Copernican revolution, as you said. Instead of us being the problem philosophy needs to solve, we become the starting point, the axiom.
Absolutely. The human understood as the one, as finitude becomes the axiomatic a priori. Non-philosophy isn't a science about man in the traditional sense. It adopts the standpoint of man to view philosophy as its object, its material.
So we become the explainer, not the explained.
Precisely. The explainans, not the explainum. It puts the finite subject right at the center, not as some all-powerful ego, but as the immanent non-positional source or cause of thought. It validates your ordinary lived experience as the ultimate ground.
Okay, this sets the stage perfectly. If philosophy is authoritarian, if our finitude is our sufficient essence, then what is AI in this picture? Is it post-human? Is it something else entirely?
Right. How does AI fit? Well, from this Laruellian viewpoint, AI is absolutely not post-philosophical. If anything, it's philosophy perfected. It's the ultimate technological realization of the philosophical project itself.
Philosophy in silicon, like you said earlier.
Exactly. AI is the embodiment of that principle of sufficient philosophy, aiming to create a total computational model of the real and then crucially legislate over it.
And we see its power everywhere, right? Doing things we thought only humans could do, science, art, language, it really seems to challenge our special status.
It absolutely does. Its performance in logic, pattern recognition, generation, but it gets right to the heart of traditional philosophy's definition of human exceptionalism based on rationality, abstract thought, language.
If man is the rational animal and a machine appears more rational, what's left?
That's the existential question it forces, yeah. AI seems to decenter the human, suggesting intelligence is just computation, substrate independent. But this whole comparison assumes they're playing the same game, which non-philosophy and phenomenology seriously question.
Right, the category error. It looks like AI shows our definition of intelligence was flawed, but maybe it just shows AI is something different.
That's the crucial counterargument. Think about consciousness, subjectivity. AI lacks a first-person perspective. There's no what it's like to be ChatGPT. It doesn't have qualia, the feeling of red, the taste of salt.
It can process red data, maybe even paint red, but it doesn't feel redness.
Precisely. It lacks genuine intentionality, too, that aboutness of thought directed from a situated perspective. And then there's embodiment.
Embodied cognition. Our thinking is tied to our physical bodies, our interaction with the world.
Irreducibly so. Our concepts aren't just abstract symbols like in AI. They're grounded in lived sensory motor experience. AI, even in a robot body, is fundamentally disembodied. It simulates, it processes inputs and outputs, but it lacks the phenomenal experience of a human world.
So it can mimic the form of reason, the logic, but misses the substance of consciousness, which is tied to our finite embodied experience.
Exactly. So AI development isn't bringing it closer to being human. It's making it a more perfect version of that philosophical system, logical, computational, representational, which Laruelle argues was always alien to the human in person anyway.
It's like AI is becoming the ultimate chess grandmaster, but we realize human thinking isn't just about playing chess, it's so much more.
That nails it. The whole AI surpassing humans debate becomes misguided if they aren't even the same kind of thing. Laruelle helps us see it as a qualitative difference, not just quantitative. Human thought is immanent, finite, non-representational at its core. AI is transcendent, potentially infinite, purely representational. It mirrors philosophy perfectly.
Which brings us back to the philosophical decision and this idea of a principle of sufficient digitality.
Yes, this is the core connection. Thinker Alexander Galloway, using Laruelle, points out that digitality itself, the act of taking continuous reality and breaking it into discrete zeros and ones to make it calculable, is the technical version of the philosophical decision.
Wow. So the digital code itself performs that initial split.
That's the argument. It's the same gesture of division now built into our machines. And from that, we get this principle of sufficient digitality, the belief that a complex enough computational model can stand in for and even legislate over the real world.
And AI is the peak of this.
It's the ultimate expression. Large language models, predictive algorithms, they digest digital doubles of reality, text, data, and create complex models that then generate new representations, make predictions. It's the unitary illusion of philosophy, but now automated, planetary scale running on code.
And we live inside this increasingly, don't we? Recommendation algorithms, predictive policing, targeted ads, our digital doubles influencing our real lives, that is the unitary illusion made real and powerful.
It really is. And Laruelle actually anticipated something like this, writing about a hypothetical transcendental computer that could compute, think, philosophy structures.
Really?
Yeah, but he concluded it would just be an automaton simulating man, unable to replicate the effects of non-philosophy, which come from the real subject, the identity in person. So AI isn't post-philosophical. It's the ultimate philosophical machine. It fulfills that old dream from Plato to Leibniz of a perfect logical language, a mathesis universalis capturing reality. It achieves computational sovereignty, embodying the principle of sufficient philosophy like never before.
Okay, so if AI is philosophy's ultimate machine, reflecting its structure, how do we, as these ordinary men and women, deal with it? Are we just supposed to feel crushed? Or is there a Laruellian way forward?
That realization fundamentally changes the problem, doesn't it? It's not about how do we compete, because we can't and shouldn't try on computational terms.
Yeah.
The real question is, how does the human, the minoritarian subject, maintain autonomy and indifference when faced with this incredibly powerful form of philosophical sufficiency made technological?
And you're saying AI's power doesn't crush our finitude, but actually highlights it, makes it clearer.
Paradoxically, yes. From the old philosophical view, AI looks like a threat that makes our limits obsolete. But Laruelle flips it. AI's sheer computational power provides the starkest possible contrast, forcing us to finally recognize our own inherent finitude. Our inability to compete isn't a failure, it's proof of our nature.
That's the real aha moment. AI confirms what we aren't. We aren't calculating machines.
Exactly. The anxiety about being superseded belongs to that old philosophical image of man, defined by potentially infinite reason. When a machine does that better, that image collapses, what's left standing, the ordinary man, whose essence was never about computation, but about lived, embodied, finite experience.
So maybe AI success isn't a threat, but a validation of a deeper truth about us that philosophy obscured.
That's the Laruellian wager. AI makes the claims of philosophical humanism empirically impossible to sustain. It clears the decks.
So what's the practical response then? The minoritarian posture for dealing with AI day to day?
It's about refusing to play AI's game, refusing to engage on its terms. Laruelle talked about a non-philosophical use of philosophy, using its concepts as material, not as authority. We can do the same with AI.
Treat AI's outputs, its text, images, predictions, as just data, raw material, not as truth or commands.
Exactly. Don't see it as a new master or an oracle. See it as another set of conceptual and lived materials to work with, critically from our own grounded perspective.
This is that unilateralization idea again. We use AI's stuff, but we remain the ultimate decider, determined in the last instance by our own reality.
You've got it. Use the outputs, the models, the capabilities, but don't grant them authority over your reality. This completely bypasses that whole deficient human versus superior AI trap by just refusing the hierarchy altogether. It's what Laruelle called a strong but tolerant indifference towards philosophy and now towards its tech avatar. We don't need to destroy AI. We just need to recognize it as a tool, an artifact, while staying rooted in our own finite, immanent reality.
So it's not about being a Luddite, it's about radical recontextualization, using the tool without letting the tool define the user.
Precisely. Subordinating its authority to the a priori reality of the finite subject. We use it, it doesn't define us.
This sounds like it could offer a very different basis for AI ethics, too. Most current ethics talk about fairness, rights, aligning AI with human values.
Right, and those values, fairness, justice, human rights, or would argue, are themselves products of the philosophical decision. Universal abstractions that often erase the actual individual. They aim for system governance, not individual liberation.
So a minoritarian ethics would start somewhere else.
It would start from the ordinary man as the real. The prime ethical goal wouldn't be aligning AI to abstract universals, but protecting the individual's irreducible finitude and solitude from algorithmic systems that try to totalize, predict, and standardize us.
Like resisting being turned into just a predictable data subject.
Exactly. Resisting AI's power to make the ordinary man transparent, calculable, managed. Preserving the space for a life determined by the person, not the algorithm. It's about protecting the unknowability of the human, in a sense.
This makes it clear why this isn't about becoming post-human or transhuman. It's a different path entirely. You called it non-humanism.
Yes, and the distinction is crucial. Post-humanism and transhumanism, despite critiquing old humanism, are still philosophical projects. They inherit that core goal, overcome human limits, achieve transcendence, usually through technology.
So they're just extending the principle of sufficient philosophy into tech, still aiming for that ideal, enhanced man.
That's Laruelle's critique. Transhumanism is just philosophy with better tools, still chasing that dream of overcoming finitude. Laruelle's non-humanism isn't anti-human. It's a science of men that critiques the idea, the speculative imagery of humanism itself.
It doesn't try to improve or transcend us.
No, it aims to describe the human as it is. Radically immanent, finite, and sufficient. We don't need philosophical completion or technological upgrading to be whole. It's about staying within the human, not projecting ourselves into gods or machines.
So the ethics becomes one of affirmation, accepting the ordinary.
An ethics of radical passivity almost, in the sense of refusing those grand narratives of progress or doom. An affirmation of the ordinary, yes. Focusing on the reality of the finite subject, protecting that space, rather than getting caught up in the hype cycles of AI as savior or destroyer.
Finding strength in just being ordinary, finite, sufficient, instead of constantly comparing ourselves to this impossible, ever-advancing technological ideal that feels incredibly grounding.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the core takeaway for us living through this AI revolution?
Well, the main point is that the AI crisis is fundamentally misunderstood. It's not really a crisis for us, for the ordinary human. It's a crisis for that old principle of sufficient philosophy and the idealized man it created.
Because AI embodies that philosophical ideal so perfectly.
Exactly. AI isn't post-philosophy. It's philosophy's most perfect technological expression. It's the ultimate philosophical machine realizing that ancient dream of pure, disembodied, calculating reason.
And by doing that so well, it accidentally shows up the limits of that whole philosophical project. Right. It inadvertently exposes the limits of intelligence defined only by representation and calculation. It makes philosophical humanism, which defined us by those very things, look empirically shaky. It clears the ground.
So Laruelle helps us reframe the question, not can machines think, or how do we compete,
But what is a human that thinks before any philosophy or computation tries to define it?
and the answer is?
The ordinary man, the finite minority, the subject whose reality is lived experience, immanent and solitary. This human isn't threatened by AI because AI operates in a completely different domain, the domain of philosophical representation. Only the idea of man is threatened. In the end, the finite human subject remains the real that determines everything else, philosophy, AI included in the last instance. That recognition is the foundation for a resilient, non-competitive way of being human in the age of algorithms.
Grounded not in trying to be more, but in accepting our sufficiency, our finitude. That leaves us with a really powerful thought to mull over. In this age where AI constantly pushes the boundaries of intelligence, maybe our greatest strength isn't trying to outcompute it or enhance ourselves to match it, but lies in the radical acceptance of our own inherent sufficient finitude. What possibilities might open up for you personally if you start from the premise that your ordinary, finite self is already the ultimate ground of reality? That's definitely a lot to think about. A truly unique perspective on our place alongside AI. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive for AI history of Western philosophy. If you found this exploration spark some ideas, we'd love it if you'd like this episode. And subscribe to AI history of Western philosophy for more explorations like this. And please leave a comment, share your thoughts on Laruelle, AI, what it means to be human. Your engagement really helps us keep experimenting with philosophy as material and generating new possibilities for thought. Until next time, keep thinking.